All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started now to honor everybody's time. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad that you joined me. For those of you who are on the call or who, I'm going to be sending out this recording of the video, so a lot of people can't join right now. But for those of you who've watched my webinar a few weeks ago, I mentioned that I wanted to do a presentation on inflammation because it was something that I was recently learning more about personally. So I'm really excited to share what I've learned thus far. And I hope you stick around to the very end because I have an exciting invitation for everybody. So for those of you who don't know me, because many of the people who registered are new and I don't know, my name is Lisa Ann de Garcia. I'm a functional health coach and I also do specific forms of kinesiology. I use both laboratory and energetic testing when I work with clients and trying to help them develop individualized protocols. And since I was a longtime educator, my focus tends to be more on learning and behavior and working with children and their families. So pretty much covers the range. I taught for nearly 25 years. I worked with struggling students. And I knew that their real issues weren't really necessarily in academics, but more rooted in physiology. So that prompted me to become a health coach to help them where they really needed it. So I have to start off with a disclaimer that this webinar is for educational purposes only. I am not a doctor. It's not intended to diagnose or treat anyone. Everyone always has to do his or her due diligence in their own health journey and consult with their doctor before changing their diet or any other lifestyle habits, especially if you're on medication. So what is the why for this webinar? So first of all, I have 3 boys, 12, 20, and 22. And my, each one, has their own struggle like we all do. My oldest struggled his whole life with ADD. My second one has autism with severe language delay. And my 12-year-old was just frankly born early. So he just had some developmental issues. But due to the age differences between the boys, I was able to start things right from birth with my youngest one that I had learned from the older one. So we were able to cut off a lot of things at the pass that I kind of knew. I also have known that those with neurodevelopment issues, brain inflammation was involved, but I didn't really understand exactly what that entailed. So now I'm on an interesting journey because just a couple of months ago, I started to notice that I woke up one morning and the lower part of my back has always been extra flexible. My chiropractor had already told me that. But then it started like pop bees, like pop, 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 pop. And I knew that I was being extra flexible, and I didn't like that because I already know, as a health coach, I already know that being hypermobile and hyperflexible isn't really a good thing. And so then a couple weeks later, it traveled up my spine and then all the way up my spine, and I go, okay, something's not right. Then I woke up maybe a month ago and my shoulder started hurting. I thought I slept on it wrong because I sleep on my side. And it wasn't that. And then I realized that when I started moving my shoulder, it started popping, pop, pop, but this side is nice and fluid and smooth. This is kind of like my sons are like this, where it just all pop. And so I knew that there was something really, not right. And then I started connecting the dots. I said, well, maybe this thing that's been going on with my wrist for the last few years, I have something weird going on in my wrist, that is connected. And maybe a few years ago when I started waking up with numb backs, I mean, that was really weird. I can wake up and my back is all numb. And it's like my upper thoracic back, I'm not holding my adjustments very well. And so then I started realizing all of those things are really connected, and then I start going back years and years and I go, okay, and connecting all the dots, and I realized that this isn't something that's new, but it's just something that I'm noticing right now. And so, funny because with my background with teaching and learning integration, and when I study all the health coaching, I'm studying from one point of view, and then all of a sudden something else is happening. So it's kind of like I'm cleaning out the kitchen, and then my living room catches on fire or something. So I decided to do some sleuthing around about connective tissue, matrix, because I knew in my studies I hear about a lot of things, but you only pay attention to certain elements that are important to you. And so I had to go back and dig through all my stuff and really start looking about connective tissue matrix, cartilage, and whatnot. And then I found out that inflammation, probably not really much of a surprise, but it plays a huge role in the deterioration of connective tissue. And so I was actually a little bit surprised about that. And of course, as well as most anything else. So I wanted to share what I learned, pass down what I learned up to now, because obviously, I don't know everything, but I have some things that I think will be very helpful to many, many people. So first of all, we know that inflammation can occur in all parts of our body, right? So we're more familiar with it on the surface, or for example, if we cut ourselves, or if we sprain an ankle or break a leg, we're familiar with the redness and the swelling, and that's maybe what we think about when we think about inflammation. But we also can get inflammation, in the gut, in the organs, in the brain. It can be part of an autoimmune disorder. So really we can have ongoing inflammation all over. Inflammation is mediated or started or triggered by the immune cells. It's as an immediate defense in response to some sort of negative stimulus. So when inflammation happens, chemicals from your body's white blood cells enter your blood or tissues to protect your body from invaders. This raises blood flow to the area of injury or infection and can cause redness, warmth, and some of the chemicals cause the fluid to leak into your tissues, which results in that swelling we were talking about. And this protective process can also trigger nerves and cause pain. And so there are a lot of different things that can trigger inflammation. And one of those things are infections. So some infections are obvious, right? When we get a strep infection or, the throat, that tends to be a very common one. But most of the time we have infections and we don't know it. Those are low-grade infections. Those are caused by bacteria, viruses, parasites, yeast, and molds. And an interesting thing that I learned one time when I was studying in a course with Dr. Klinghardt was he said when you injure yourself, so let's say you injure your knee in some kind of an accident, and we have that inflammation happening. So it may be because, when you injure your knee and that inflammation is happening, that causes a terrain, a ripe environment where bugs and bacteria and other critters want to go to. And that is, then they kind of want to hijack or squat in the area, and they take it over, and now it's like their terrain. So sometimes you can have a pain in an area years later, and sometimes it's because maybe you tore something, but oftentimes it could be because that area, that inflammation never was able to fully go away because all the bugs and everything that took it over caused a chronic low-grade inflammation. So that was really interesting, and that was kind of an aha thing for me because I had an injury that I had to think about possibly that could be what was going on. Another trigger are chemicals and toxins. So anything like prescription or over-the-counter drugs, asbestos, paint, detergents, hairsprays, cosmetics, food additives, pesticides, basically anything that's not natural, that we're able to breathe, that we're able to absorb through our skin, that we're able to absorb in our gut, is going to, if it can get into our bloodstream, our immune system is going to probably, or it can easily get activated and say, this is foreign, it doesn't belong here, we need to get rid of it. Other environmental factors might be like pollen, dust, the chemtrails that they are so kindly spraying over our skies with nanonized aluminum and other toxins that just, come down and we breathe in, and there's nothing we can really do about it because it's everywhere we live. And the cell towers, the Wi-Fi, all of our technology, the electromagnetic stuff that's going on. Foods is a huge contributor to inflammation. So people with higher sugar diets have more inflammatory markers in their blood, including a marker called C-reactive protein. So if you've ever taken a CBC blood test or any kind of blood work, you might want to go back and see if you have that marker on there called C-reactive protein. Sugar stimulates the production of free fatty acids in the liver. When the body digests these fatty acids, the resulting compounds can trigger inflammatory process. Other foods are like saturated fats, like such as red meat or full fat dairy products, trans fats, excess omega-6 acids like in corn oil, sunflower oil, vegetable oil, refined carbohydrates, some breads, white rice, white potatoes, alcohol, and MSG. When proteins and fats combine with sugar in our blood, it results in a harmful compound called advanced glycation end products, AGE. Excess sugar and gluten also contributes to our gut being more permeable, which allows the bacteria and inflammatory products such as undigested proteins into our bloodstream, which also means the low enzyme and hydrochloric acid production could be a problem. So if you're not digesting those proteins, then you might have to look at, well, am I producing enough hydrochloric acid and enough enzymes to even digest that? Sugar and other inflammatory foods cause our bad LDL cholesterol to rise, leading to a more C-reactive protein as well. So we kind of alluded to the leaky gut, and by now, many people these days have heard about and are familiar with the term leaky gut. When we started, when our son with autism, when he was 3, in 2003, people weren't talking about the leaky gut except for the doctor he had, all the naturopaths and those type of people were, but you didn't hear it on the radio like you're hearing it today. But essentially, we have a microbiome living in our gut. And quite frankly, all over our body, on our skin, in our brain, on our heart. And they're finding more different microbiomes all over our body. But an imbalance of that microbiome is called a dysbiosis. And that's where the bad bugs are kind of misbehaving and going rogue, and they're kind of ruling the territory. So what you want is it's okay, we have bad bugs and we have good bugs. We have bad and good viruses, we have, but we want everybody to be integrated and to behave themselves. And it's kind of like having a lawn. It's okay to have a few weeds and a couple of dandelions here or there. When you drive by, the lawn still looks great. But if your lawn gets overrun by dandelions and overrun by weeds, all of a sudden you have the homeowners association knocking at your door, right? Or sending you nasty grams. So it's kind of like the same thing. So the bad bugs produce endotoxins, which cause inflammation. So lipopolysaccharides is an endotoxin that is derived from the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria. That is the more harmful bacteria. And it's considered to be the highest contributor to inflammation. So that's really important to notice, okay? So there's a huge importance on regulating the microbiome and lowering that inflammation. And then gluten can also cause a leaky gut because it raises zonulin. Zonulin is a blood protein that reflects the level of the intestinal permeability. So sometimes we want the intestines to open a little bit to get some fluid in, to get some fluid out, to make things go back and forth. But we want that knitting to close. But if we have that constant release of zonulin, it just kind of stays open. And on top of that, if we have some infection, we just have a mess. And then we just have this like huge net where all these proteins and everything can get through. So toxins, protein pathogens, and undigested foods can leak through. So we should take a second to talk about those food proteins. When we eat foods, our hydrochloric acid and pancreatic enzymes are supposed to break down the proteins. So Dr. O'Brien, he has a great analogy. He talks about a pearl necklace. He says, okay, here's your protein. If we snip little parts of that pearl necklace, we have peptides. Each pearl is an amino acid. It makes up a peptide. When we get those peptides through our gut, or proteins through our gut, then we start triggering the immune system, okay? And then what happens is then over time, if the immune system is always triggered by certain peptides, let's say from gluten or from dairy, then and it's constantly triggered, well, some of those peptides actually look like tissue, like our thyroid, or tissue in our cerebellum, or other parts of our brain. And then the immune system gets thrown off, and then it attacks itself because it's kind of confused. And that can cause autoimmune conditions. And another, so some symptoms of gut inflammation might be IBS, IBD, chronic diarrhea, constipation, bloating, nutritional deficiencies, skin problems, because your skin is a mirror of your gut. It's not just something that's happening on the outside, such as acne, rashes, eczema, and then joint pain, etc. Many of you are probably already also familiar with this idea of the gut-brain connection. And again, we heard about this back in 2003, but now it's becoming a little bit popular. And there is really a mirror relationship between the two. So if the gut is leaky, you can pretty much bet that the brain is also going to be leaky. And they used to think that the brain was sterile, but now they realize it also has its own microbiome, like we were talking about, just like the gut. So if the gut, if you have gut inflammation, you probably have brain inflammation. And some of those symptoms are going to be like depression, mood disorders, fatigue, insomnia, brain fog, poor cognitive function, confusion, headaches, and difficulty concentrating. So a little 101 on the immune system, and trust me, the immune system can be like extremely technical and overwhelming, but here's kind of the basics. We have two parts of the immune system. We have the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is the part that we're born with, and it has an important role in controlling infections during the first 7 days after an infection. So it's kind of a more generic response to pathogens, and it's our first line of defense. So there's a lot of different kind of cells in our innate immune system, these dendritic cells, macrophages, mast cells, and eosinophils, but they produce cytokines or interact with cells directly in order to activate the adaptive immune system, which is the other side. And many of them are phagocytes, which they identify and exterminate foreign particles. So they kind of like find it, they kind of gulp them up and envelop them, and then try to get rid of them. And the mast or the natural killer cells, they're the ones, they're right here, they're the ones that are involved with cancer. The adaptive immune system, that comes to us from our mom, in the womb. So that's why it's really important that we have natural childbirth when possible, because as the baby goes to the birth canal, the mother or in that birth canal is the first inoculation of the baby. And that stays with the baby for a lifetime, actually. But we also get antigens from like colds or vaccines, and those are our second line of defense. And so, and that's also why it's important that mom is also has a good immune system so she can pass that on to the baby. And this side has to do with allergens and lifelong immunity. And these T cells right here, they receive the messages from the phagocytes, and they to eliminate enemies and inform the B cells to produce antibodies. So here's the B cells, and these are the antibodies. And what they do is these like little proteins, they kind of flag the enemies, so then the other things can come and attack it and destroy it. The innate system, the macrophages detect the bacteria, they envelop it and break it down. And so the dendritic cells, they are the messengers between the innate and the adaptive immune system. So enough about that. So what is the inflammatory process? So we need inflammation because that's what helps our body to repair itself. Otherwise, our body wouldn't know that it needed to repair itself. So it is really important. We don't want to completely squash out or eliminate the inflammatory process. But it's like when you know, a bathtub. You want to take a nice bath, but if it overflows, then it destroys your house, right? So you want to be able to have a gas and to have a break. So this is what our cell looks like when there is an inflammatory challenge. And I got this image from a presentation Dr. Paul Clayton did, and I really like it. But it looks like when there's an inflammatory challenge, it looks like a little like World War III are going on inside your cell. But to make it a little bit simpler, we have a extremely simplified version. And here is the cell membrane right here, the inflammatory challenge. And what it does is it, the omega-6, the arachidonic acid starts, and it starts the inflammation process. And then the omega-3s, if there's omega-3s, then it comes in and it stops it by producing these resolvins and protectins. Okay, so it's really critical that we have this balance of omega-6 to omega-3. Because if we don't have enough omega-3, we cannot stop the inflammation process, and then we get this ongoing, long-going chronic inflammation. And if you have a high 6:3 ratio, the cell releases particles called cell dust or exosomes, which cause the release of enzymes called matrix metalloproteases. And these are extremely destructive enzymes, which destroys the extracellular matrix, the collagen, the cartilage, bone, arterial walls, connective tissue, all those things that hold you together, okay? And so this is why I was very intrigued when I started learning about this, because it's like, all right, that's what's happening with me. Now I understand, I hear about inflammation, but I understand exactly what is the direct relationship between inflammation and connective tissue degradation. So here's a picture of some like the matrix or connective tissue when it's not as dense as it should be. And one of the jobs actually of the extracellular or the extracellular matrix and your connective tissue, all your matrix or your tissue, is actually also to protect ourselves from EMF. So if we are having a problem with our matrix, we're extra susceptible to EMF, which is an extra problem right now because we're not only going from 4G, which was already a problem, but to 5G, which is going to be catastrophic, and it's a topic for a whole nother time. But so we want to be extra diligent about keeping our matrix and our connective tissue dense to protect ourselves from the things that we really don't have much control over. And when those those matrix intelliproteases are on kind of like on steroids. When they're over accelerated by certain things such as flesh-eating bacteria, then this is the type of result that can happen. Now, obviously this is a certain bacteria, but it's the exact same enzyme that is causing this. Polyphenols inhibit also those enzymes, those matrix intelliproteases, and they keep them under control, which is why a Mediterranean diet is actually really good for you. Unfortunately, I did not grow up with olives. I never acquired a taste for them. Now, as an older adult, I have to consciously try to eat the foods, but this diet, this is one of the reasons why this diet is so good for you. And so a diet really highly depleted in polyphenols, like a typical Western, US or Western diet, mixed with an imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3, you're dissolving your matrix and preventing this inflammation process to extinguish. And in fact, just like 2 weeks ago, I was driving, I don't know, on a trip or something, and I heard a research study saying that 3 grams of fish oil per day can turn off as many as 453 bad genes. So that's amazing, because most of the genes they were talking about were like the carcinogenic type genes. And, you know, when we're talking about genes, we all have them. And our genes might dictate when we get exposed to certain toxins, what we might express, whether it's a cancer or a diabetes or whatever. However, those genes can be turned on or can be turned off, and they're turned on when they're in the ripe, poor environments with certain foods, certain stressors, but they can be turned off by eating certain foods and the lack of, you know, when we lower our stressors. So because the people, let's say 100 years ago, they had a lot of the same genes, but they just were all turned off, most of them. So if we look at neuroinflammation, we know that it underlines most neuro and cognitive disorders, including brain fog, ADHD, Alzheimer's, autism, etc. It's an inflammation of the nervous tissue. It could be from infection, traumatic brain injury, toxins, food, other stressors from the gut, autoimmunity. There's so many different things. The brain is protected by a blood-brain barrier that kind of surrounds it. Which is made out of astrocytes and endothelial cells. So those are the 2 cells. And we can have a leaky brain, just like we can have a leaky gut. And chronic inflammation causes the degradation of the tissue of that and the blood-brain barrier. The microglia are the innate cells in the central nervous system. Those are the immune cells, those macrophages. It's located in the brain, and it releases the signals to recruit the peripheral immune cells, so the immune cells in the other parts of the body, for an inflammatory response. Microglia also generate reactive oxygen species, which is a type of free radical that reacts with the other molecule in the cell, and it builds up in the cells, and it causes damage to the DNA, the RNA, and the proteins, and may cause cell death of the neurons. So the whole question is then, how do we stop it? So what is going to be our game plan? Well, it's kind of twofold. First, we have to extinguish the flames, and then we have to remove the gasoline. You can't just do one or the other, because if you extinguish the flames, but you still got the gas going on, then it's just going to flare up all over again. But sometimes, you know, you might kind of have to start somewhere. You sort of have to do it simultaneously. But we're going to start with just the extinguishing the flame. So first we're going to work on, okay, how do we reduce that fire? So we need to improve that omega-6 to 3 ratio to a 3.1 or better. That's what all the research says. We need a diet rich in polyphenols. We need beta-glucans 1,3, 1,6, and also curcumin is amazing at lowering inflammation, and then vitamin D. I didn't put the curcumin in this slide on accident. Some of the ideal foods that you might want to eat, so you might want to screenshot this and put this on your refrigerator, but salmon, green leafy vegetables, celery, beets, bok choy, broccoli, ginger, spirulina, blueberries, pineapple, coconut oil, chia seed, flaxseed, walnuts, pomegranate, turmeric, and garlic are all wonderful. Then we need to start thinking about, okay, how are we going to remove this gasoline? So first we need to stop eating anti-inflammatory foods, right? Foods rich in omega-6, like red meats, trans fats, refined sugars, and carbohydrates. We all might have individual foods that are inflammatory for us. So figuring out what those individual foods are. Exercise, reducing EMF exposure, good sleep hygiene, reduce stress, eliminate environmental toxins. In functional diagnostic nutrition, we call that DRESS, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. Supplementation's not on this slide. But you know, you can spend a lot of time here. I mean, you can even spend years. So first step, just do the obvious, right? Do you need to move more? Are you going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning when you should be going to bed at 10? Are you on your cell phone all day, especially right before bed? Is your cell phone under your pillow? I've known people to do that. Do you live next door to someone who does spray painting for a living? We had that happen when my kids were little. And so I started thinking back, you know, when we're trying to trace things and like, oh, maybe that wasn't really helpful when my son was losing his speech and, you know, stuff, because we had a neighbor in the back who it wasn't a house, it was a business. So, you know, over time, this is a journey, a huge journey, but over the time, you know, you refine yourself, you can refine it. So you just start with the obvious and just take one step at a time. We also need to increase that flexibility of the cell membrane. We didn't really talk about that, but the cell membrane, the saturated fats makes it real rigid, and omega-3s makes it nice and flexible. EMF actually doesn't do it any favors either. If the cell wall is rigid, if it's not working correctly, the nutrients can't get in and out of the cell, and it can't do its job, right? And it can't, you know, produce the power and what it needs. And if you're kind of like me, I have in my pantry, it looks like a little natural health food store. I have a billion supplements. I have my favorites. I have a lot of things, you know, some things work, some things don't. But the problem is that if our cell membrane is not working, we could be eating a great organic diet, and we could be consuming a bunch of supplements, but it's not going where it's supposed to go, and we're wasting our money. So we want to make sure that we're kind of first things first. Let's repair our cells before we start taking our supplements, or at least simultaneously. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to know our ratio. So when I comb the research, again, the ideal ratio is 3 to 1 or better. Some of the chronic disorders or diseases required a 2.5 to 1 ratio, or even a 2 to 1 ratio to reverse it. So if we want to know exactly, because we want this to be test-based nutrition, right? We want to not guess at, you know, I think I have inflammation, I have some signs, but know exactly what is your ratio. So take a simple test that is a finger prick test. It's a blood test. You send it off to a lab. This particular lab, they're in Norway or Sweden. I think this lab is in Norway. The Zenzino company is in Sweden, and the lab is in Norway. So the lab is not, it's a different company, but Zenzino markets it. So anyway, people who take traditional omega-3 like I did are surprised when they have a ratio of approximately 7 to 1. Now mine was about 5.4 to 1, but my son, who also takes omegas and takes things, he was 18 to 1. The average person in Europe is 15 to 1, and in the US is 25 to 1. The next thing you need to do then, once you know what your ratio is, you got to improve it. So we're going to use a combination of omega-3s and polyphenols. And after I kind of scoured everything, I've been using tons of different oils, I finally found one that has a combination of omega-3 and polyphenols together. And the reason that's so powerful and it's so important is because omega-3 naturally, it comes from the algae of the seafloor, the bed. And then you have the little fish that eat it and the bigger fish and all that, and that's how they get all the omegas. But it's always bound to the polyphenol until the companies that extract it, I don't know how they do that, but when they take out, they take it out, it somehow decouples, and then it exposes the omega-3s to oxidation. And so the polyphenol protects it from being, from oxidation. And the reason that's important is because that's when it can go rancid. And if it can't, it's very temperature sensitive. So if it goes in your body, and if it can only last a couple hours before it turns rancid or oxidizes, then it's not doing you any favors. So they've tested this oil, and they stopped at 35 hours because they were like, okay, that was enough. So this oil, they know for sure, is able to go through your entire system without being oxidized. Plus, you get that added punch of having really rich polyphenols. And another reason I like this one in particular is because it's 100% natural. All the excipients, everything in it is natural. No fillers or anything. But it tastes good. I take it and straight and drink water, but it has a version that's water soluble, so it's great for the kids because you can put it in the water. It's lemon, and you put it in the water, and they don't even know it's there. We take a fruit smoothie, so I just put it in there because the oils we were taking before, it floated, and I'd have to stir it and say, okay, drink it right away, and they'd complain whenever they'd see the floating oil. So and then also there's a vegan one too. Oh, and the water soluble one's great if you have gallbladder issues or issues with your fats. If you can't tolerate fats. And then they have a vegan one too. So there's a lot of great options. So that's why I like them. And then through all their 550,000 tests, they found out that 5% of those tested have a ratio of 3.1 or lower when they're tested the first time. And 20% already take an omega-3 supplement, but the results are still not optimal. 75% are not on any omega-3 supplement, and they have a ratio of 15.1 or higher, or in the States, 25.1 or higher. And 95% of the people taking the Balance Oil product daily have an omega-6 to 3 ratio near 3 to 1 after 120 days. So they offer the test and the test because they want to prove efficacy of their oil. And so that's what I really like, because then they're pretty much proving that if you take it faithfully and you have to make some obvious adjustments to your diet, and then you're able to get that ratio down. And then you can do further supports with beta-glucans and curcumin. Those are two hugely impactful things for your immune system and for the inflammation. Zinzino actually has a great beta-glucan product, but there's other companies that do too. Then after that, once you start doing the obvious, then you can hunt for other hidden stressors using additional lab or kinesiology testing, whichever you prefer, or both. But things like food sensitivity testing, looking for pathogens, seeing if your body's making any antibodies to any neurotissue. That's an important one. So there's different types of things that you can be looking for, trying to figure out what are the stressors in my body that are causing inflammation. So to recap this journey, first we are going to try to put out the fire by knowing what our level is, by using an oil that's proven to reduce the ratio, then also removing the gasoline by doing some of the obvious things. And then adding some things like beta-glucans or turmeric or curcumin. Curcumin's an extract from the turmeric. And then starting to dig things that are really individualized for you and what is kind of going on with you. But a lot of times, if just doing this part all by itself, in a few weeks, you can just find amazing changes. And then after a little bit, then you might want to start digging a little bit deeper. It just depends on what your situation is and how into a problem that you are. And one thing I forgot to say about this oil only is that I use a lot of different supplements from a ton of different companies. And so whenever I get new ones, I have a friend in another state, and she's also a kinesiologist like me, and she also does functional health coaching just like me. We do the same things. And so we share each other, we send each other supplements whenever we find something that we like to test out on our clients. She works with really sick clients, you know, and I tend to work with different populations, so we test. And we both found that we were very surprised that this one tests very strong with pretty much everybody we tested against, where some other supplements that we get, we might test strong with some people and not everybody. And then some supplements don't really seem to test strong with anybody. So we were very impressed with this one. So knowledge is power, right? That's why it's important to do your testing. So if you want to join me, because I did my test about a month ago, and my son, we did our test about a month ago, and I'm about to have my husband do his test as well. And I invite you to do a 30-day balance challenge with us. So this is what it's going to look like. In order to do the challenge, you're going to need to get a subscription package that has 2 balance tests and then an oil. And then every month after that, you get an oil. And it's actually a huge deal because I do a lot of different lab testing, and retail one test cost $165, but the 2 tests and the oil all together is only $109. So it's a huge deal. So you can't not do it and not know, okay? And what they do is they send you the test the first month. They send you the second test on the 4th month, because that's 120 days. They automatically send it to you. And then that's when you do your retest. We're gonna start this in 2 weeks. That way, for everybody who is interested, I have time to help you get your things that you need to register for everything. And then, and you have time to get it in the mail. So the first week we'll talk about taking the test, and we'll send it out, or some people who are right on it might send it out as soon as they get it in the mail. And then the next couple weeks we'll talk about the different omega-6s or omega-3s or anything else in particular, what type of food, what is it about, what are, things like that. And then on the 4th week, everybody should have their results back. So in that week, we're gonna share, you don't have to share your results, but I think, we should, because, but we can share our results. We're gonna have some goal setting and looking at, okay, what are gonna be our next steps in order to achieve what we wanna achieve. Then I'm gonna have a 2-week break. And after that, I would like to do so I guess before I say, the challenge, I'm gonna charge $39. And it's only $39 because I want to you to focus on getting your materials, because that's more important. So just $39. But then after the 2-week break, I am going to start a comprehensive group course on extinguishing inflammation. So this is going to go beyond the omega balance. It's going to look at all the ways to remove the gasoline from the fire. So it's going to be structured as a 12-week course. Every other week, I'm going to post content. I'll have a topic or whatever, content, and every other week we'll do a live Q&A, and that way we can have some accountability, because I don't know about you, but I'm tired of taking all these classes online. I've taken some awesome classes online where I'm learning, but I'm not getting to know or interact with anybody. So on these live Q&As, we're going to be able to hold each other accountable. We're going to be able to talk, ask questions, give each other ideas, and then we are going to, if there's a large group, we can go into breakout sessions, so you can have a steady small group of people that you're accounting to, but if we're a small group, we'll just do it all together. This course is going to be, it's $397, but if you purchase it with the challenge now, because that way you can be doing your first test. The way I've timed it is the last day of this course, you should have the second test, your retest back, and then we can have like a celebration. So then you can go through the entire thing. So I'm only going to charge $247 to do both the challenge and the group course. And you would use this coupon code BALANCE 2020. And in the chat box, I am going to paste, hopefully it works. Let's see if it works. So I just pasted the links to the challenge only and the course and the challenge combo. And if you do the combo, you use the coupon code. And then I would just manually put you into both. And that's kind of the easiest way. If you are only interested in taking your test and just doing it for yourself, taking the test, getting the oils, what have you, then just contact me and I will set you up for your materials, and you don't have to join the course. But I think it would be great to have a group of people and to kind of learn some things so you don't have to do it all by yourself. But I'm just interested in people changing their lives, turning their lives around. And I want to invite you to do it with me. I've been working on, my kids for a long time, but now it's like, I need to do something on my own. So I hope that you join me in doing that, but however you want to do that is up to you. And if there's anyone who wants to ask questions, I'm happy to stick around. You can put them in the chat box, or I'm going to turn off the video or the recording, and then if you want to ask any live questions. That way, if you want to ask live questions, then your voice doesn't have to be recorded. So I'm stop the recording.